And you know, I think the thing that a good teacher does is that they see inside you what is just a seed. They see the potential of a flower, but it's just a seed. You don't even see that in yourself, especially if you're una tiguerita of 10 years old, but they see it in you. They see the possibility. And this teacher realized that I love stories. I love telling them. I just didn't like reading and I didn't like school. And somehow, I don't know how she did it, she convinced me that books were like tias and tios. Some books, not the boring ones that we've been reading with jog and memorization, but some books were like storytellers. They had the stories inside them. But you had to do one thing. You had to do some work first. You had to learn to be a reader. But once you were a reader and you got inside that book, you had access to all these other stories that you had to wait till your tia was in a good mood, your abuelita had a free moment, somebody wanted to tell you a story. But this you could access yourself. And how she convinced me that this would happen when I became a reader, it's what a teacher does. I became a reader, and soon I was inside the books. How wonderful that this was a world where everybody was welcome. It didn't say you can't be a spig, you can't have an accent, you've got to be white, you've got to be a boy, you opened the book cover and you became this other person, and you understood this other reality. You could be a slave, you could be a queen, you could be a boy, you could be a girl, reading books. And I felt like it was this huge table where everybody was welcome. And if you got one more reader to join the group, nobody got the poorer. It became richer. It was a bigger and bigger circle. And I said, oh my God, this is where I want to become a citizen of. So I feel like I left the Dominican Republic and I landed in the world of the imagination. That's the world that I wanted to be a part of. And this teacher, after I became a reader, I realized with her, there was only one story that I wasn't reading, the one that only I could tell. And this is how you become a writer. People say, what's the secret of becoming a writer? You become a reader. You sit down at the circle. You're a little moscosa. You're sitting there listening to Shakespeare and Homer and Toni Morrison and then you realize, hey, it's my turn, it's my turn. Or your teacher says, raise your hand and say it's your turn. My turn, my turn. And you become a storyteller, part of this circle. So what was wonderful was to become a reader. I felt like the print lifted, and these writers said, come on in, you're welcome in here. So here's three it was, remember, before multicultural education. So the people we were reading were, I had Jane Austen, George Eliot, who gave herself a man's name in order to be read, and Emily Dickinson. And they said, come on in. They don't want you out there. Come on in. So I entered, and I became a writer. And I love this picture because I feel like as I became a writer, all the things that I felt like I lost from La República Dominicana came back through the writing. And this is a little lomita outside of La Capital that we used to go to when I was a little girl. And I felt like writing it all came back. And that's part of what happens when you become a writer. There's a way, it's portable. It's the things that you can carry with you. So where do my ideas come from? I told you my sisters and I, unlike the Mirabar sisters, were the ones that made it. So we arrived in the United States, it was the 60s. We became little hippie girls. So here's a picture of Las Hermanas Alvarez. And so when I went to write my first novel, you know, all the stories of growing up and all the issues about papi and boys and being hippies and all the things my friends who were Latinas were going through, it all got into how the Garcia girls got lost their accents. So it came out of my own experience, but also invention, a combination. So the second novel, I felt like I had written about experiences based on my own experiences, and then I felt like I had to go back to these other women that were the ones who didn't make it, and that's how I came to write En el tiempo de las mariposas, in the time of the butterflies. And this is from before we were free, the story that I told you about. I became really interested in children's literature, and I talk a little bit about why that was so in a few slides. I became interested in what it was like for children in the dictatorship. So these are Huáscar Tejeda, one of the men that killed Trujillo, my uncle, Tomeme, who hit Huáscar Tejeda. This was, I don't know how many of you know about Luis Añama Tío, another one that was part of the Trujillo plot, one of the ones that survived, and he hid in the bathroom of this woman, in the closet in this woman's bathroom, until the Trujillo family disappeared. So in writing about the children and before we were free, I put all these characters together, and that's where the idea of Before We Were Free came from. Then, out of the Alola books, part of the thing I presented to the kids this afternoon was the stories. There's a series that I've written about una tía loquísima que se llama Tía Lola, and she's fun, and people say, well, what's she like? And I say, she's like a Latina Mary Poppins. She comes to help with a familia from the Dominican Republic. She comes a visitar, but like in our families, they come to visit, and they stay forever. So this is Tía Lola, the Tía Lola series, and I wanted, she comes straight off from the Dominican Republic. She doesn't speak any Spanish, any English. She speaks only in Spanish, and she comes to be with her sobrina, who's Dominican American, and the sobrina has 2 kids who are totally American kids. So I wanted to show, all the generational things that happen, from the full Dominicana to the little kids who feel like they're totally American. So that's Tía Lola, and I wrote the first Tía Lola, and then kids would write me and say, well, what happened to Tía Lola? And I would say, well, use your imagination. And then I thought, well, let me help them out. So this is, in honor of the teachers, Tía Lola goes to school to teach all the kids in Vermont a little Spanish, a little Santeria, and so how Tía Lola learned to teach. And then what happened is that at the end of that book, some characters showed up, and I wondered, well, what happens to them? So how Tía Lola saved the summer. And now I have 3 seasons, and I had to do the 4th, right? This is Tía Lola starts a summer camp, except they learn magical things, and they learn all kinds of Dominican things. She's making them aplatanos in Vermont. And so finally, in the last one, I had to think of the last one. I said, okay, Tía Lola, you have to leave. I have to write other books. You can't stay forever. Julia's not just going to keep writing about you. You have to leave. So this is the last book, and I have to say goodbye to Tía Lola. So Tía Lola, do you have B&Bs here? B&Bs, they're like hotels called bed and breakfast. They have them in Vermont. So Tía Lola decides that she's going to stay in Vermont and open a B&B, but she calls it a Tía Lola C and C and C. Cama, comida, y cariño. Tía Lola C and C and C. So, well, this can go on forever. This is another book that I wrote because here I am in Vermont, and they call me up from the farms to come translate. There's all these Spanish speakers that are milking in the farms, and there's no one to speak Spanish. Could I come and translate? And it turns out that in most of the dairy farms in Vermont now, the lecheros, the people milking, are Mexicans that have come up from the border all the way to Vermont. So I get involved with the Mexican community there. And this is a book, Return to Sender, that came out of that experience. People say again, where do your ideas come from? They come from, you know, Charlie Parker, the great jazz musician, said, if you don't live it, it won't come out of your horn. And I really believe that it's your experience and the things you do in your life that really connect you to your calling. You know, so that what I write about comes out of the things in my life and the ways that I feel passionate in the community that I live in. And this happens to be Vermont. How are we doing for time? Because I want to get a little bit into our experience in the Dominican Republic with going back to the DR and wanting to do a community project in the Dominican Republic with my husband, compañero Bill, who loves farming. That's what he loves. And so we went back to the DR and we got involved in this community of small agricultores who were trying to save their land from the corporate model of agriculture, which is doing a lot of deforestation and growing acres and acres of coffee under the sun, but they cut the trees, they put veneno, pesticides in the soil, the birds were all poisoned, no rain comes because there's no trees, and when they leave to start another corporate farm, this is what stays behind. And the small farmers can't afford to compete, so they end up selling their little parcelas and not having, the one thing they know how to do is farm. So we went back to the DR. I was writing an article for the Nature Conservancy, and we met a group of farmers, and we got involved with their dilemma. So these are some of the farmers we met, and we said, how can we help you? And they said, no, first they said, "Ustedes no pueden ayudar, can you help us?" And I said, "Oh sure, I'm going to write this terrific article to bring your cause in front of Americanos." And they said, "No, can you help us?" And Bill grew up in Nebraska on a farm that went under because of the corporate agriculture. This is what Occupy Wall Street is all about, you know? And Bill said to me, digo, eres bastante aplatanado, but he says to me, "What's going on? What do they want?" And I say to myself, do I translate for him what's going on? Because we're in trouble. Well, he said, "Of course we're going to help you. Of course we're going to help you." So he's the one that dragged me, kicking and screaming. I said, "Pero Cuco," his name is Cuco, because he's a big scary guy. "Pero Cuco, how can we become part of this community and help these farmers? We live in Vermont." And he said, "There's got to be a way to help them." So we bought up some abandoned parcelas, and the first thing was to plant trees, to start reforesting the mountainside, and to plant the coffee plants. And so we thought, what are we going to call this project? And I said, "Bueno, my name is Altagracia, Julia Altagracia. Why don't we name this place in this project Altagracia? It's high in the mountains, and we want it to be a place of grace, gracia." So we call the place Altagracia. The coffee is called Café Altagracia, from the cooperative of farmers that pull their coffee together. And a book came out of it. This is how it works. A book about La Virgencita de la Altagracia. And a cafecito story came also out of the project. This is, if you want directions, you're welcome to go visit. It's up from Jarabacoa. You keep going towards Manabao. And in Manguito, where there's a gallera, you say, "Mira, ¿dónde está la finca Altagracia?" And you go up, and there it is. So Bill was busy with the agriculture, and he said, "What do I do? Like, I'm a big farmer, right? I'm a reader, I'm a writer." So at night we would read stories. And, it was for the kids, but the adults would come and gather. And we thought, What's going on? Nobody knew how to read or write.